Do you know which are the most difficult questions where there is high probability of you losing the marks, especially in multiple choice kind of an exam? These are the statement based questions where you have to choose 2, 3, 4 correct or incorrect statements out of the given options, right? So today we are going to crack the strategy to answer such kind of questions effectively and correctly. Hello everyone, welcome to Score Settled. So, in such kind of questions, the most important thing is about the concepts. If you're clear with your basics, if you're clear with the ideology, if you're clear with the theoretical perspectives, there is absolutely no chance that you can go wrong in such questions. And therefore, clearing your basics is very important before any sort of exam, be it theoretical, be it objective. Right? So today we are going to talk about such questions which are going to test your concepts. Okay, so let's begin. Now, first question is that which of the following comprises the current account of the balance of payments? Now, one thing that you should know is that the current account basically deals with recurring kind of payments, which are recurring, whereas the capital account deals with your assets or liabilities or investments, basically where there is creation of asset or there is a liability that is being created. So that comes under capital account, whereas current account is some recurring payments. There is no creation of asset as such. Okay, so let's start. So first statement is that invisible exports and imports. Yes, these are the major component of your current account balance of payment, right? So we have to see if A is present in the options. It is not there in option 2, so strike it out. Direct investment. This is clearly a part of your capital account. Okay, so it should not be there in the option. So we can strike out 4. Unilateral transfers, yes, it is there. One-way payment, there is no kind of an asset that is created here. So C should be there. So A and C, that's there. We can strike out this. SDR allocations and borrowings from foreign countries. SDR allocations and foreign countries, they come under your capital account. Simple. So the correct answer is option 3 in this case. Next question. Which of the following are not true pertaining to Wagner's law of increasing state activities? Not true, right? So please focus on this. Now, first statement is that Wagner's law is classified as the positive theory of public expenditure. Yes, Wagner's law basically states that as your societies are advancing, the state's expenditure should increase, especially on areas like education, health, all sorts of social areas, right? So it is the state's responsibility to ensure that their population is receiving the basic, necessities. Okay, so A is correct, but because the question mentions not true, we have to strike out the option where A is there. Okay, so this one. Next is public sector in industrializing nations grow as a proportion of total economic activity with the increase in per capita income and output. This is the very basic statement of Wagner's law. So this is also right? So we have to strike out options where B is there. So again, after reading 2 statements, we've come to the answer as 4 here. Okay. Now, just going further, it's your choice during the exam. If you've come to this conclusion, you are very sure that A and B are right, so they should not be there in the options. I can simply take 4 and move forward with my questions, right? So that is also the correct strategy. But here we are going to discuss further statements also, simply to clarify the concept. Let's go for C. Proportionate increase in public sector is not constant, but increasing with the increase in total economic activity. This is true. This statement is also true. Then The law accounts for the effects of war on public expenditure? No. Basically, this theorem is mainly concerned about your long-term structural growth. Long-term structural growth, right? And public expenditure tends to grow in a stepwise manner. This is the statement by Peacock-Weisman hypothesis. Okay, and not your Wagner's law. Okay, so fourth is the right answer in this case. Next question. Which of the following are true in case of externality? So this is where the students go wrong. You know, they misinterpret. Like whether it is asking correct, not correct, are true, not true. So please read the questions very, very, very carefully. Okay. So now which of the following are true in case of externality? Statement A. In case of externality, all costs and benefits associated with the goods are not internalized by the households and firms involved in buying and productions. This is the very statement of externality, right? So A should be there. So it is not there in option 2. It's not there in option 4. Next. Presence of externality results either under underproduction or overproduction of the good. This statement is also true. Next. Market-based decisions making yields an efficient outcome in the presence of externality? No. There are chances of market failures in the presence of externalities. Externalities do not lead to efficiency. Sorry, no. Right? So C is wrong. Then, in case of negative externality, marginal social cost is higher than the marginal cost? Yes, that is there. Okay, so A, B, D is there. Well-defined property rights can solve the problem of externalities. Very, very true. Coase theorem. That's what it talks about, right? So the answer is 3 in this case. Next question. Which of the followings are true about neoclassical approach? First is that the main protagonist was R.E. Lucas Jr. Yes, he gave the Lucas critique. This is true, right? So his critique was based on rational expectations that if people are able to clearly and correctly anticipate what a policy would result into, then that policy will be ineffective in that case. Okay, so A is true. So we can strike out 3. Then it is based on adaptive expectations? Not at all. Rather, it is based on rational expectations that people have information, they have appropriate knowledge, and they can clearly foresee what a policy will result into. So B is wrong. So we can strike out 4, we can strike out 1. So 2 is the right answer. Again, you can either move on to another question, right, if there is shortage of time. If you have sufficient times, just make sure of it, right? Then it was developed during 1950s. No, it was rather neoclassicals emerged in 1970s. It was neoclassicals who emerged in 1950s. Okay, so C is also wrong. Complete wage and price flexibility, this is true. And difference between actual and expected price is a random error. This is true, because when agents are clearly able to anticipate or clearly able to foresee what a policy will be or what impact will a policy have, then even if there is an error, it will be a random one, simply because the agents have complete information about the situation. Okay, so E is right. So second is the right answer here. But before we move forward, I just want to make clear the difference between neoclassicals and neoclassicals. Okay, so this is a common confusion basically, like, among students, that what is the difference between neo and new. Okay, so first thing is that neoclassicals, okay, they have emphasized on microeconomic behavior. right? They have emphasized, while classicals were mainly into macro kind of a situations, neoclassicals have incorporated micro agents as well, micro parameters, microeconomic parameters in their theories, right? For example, they have included utility maximization and demand supply equilibrium and so on. They have included it, right? Even though they were macroeconomists, but they have included parameters related to microeconomics also. But neoclassicals, yes, they were a branch of neoclassicals only, that they have also included microeconomic elements. But one thing that differentiates between neoclassicals and neoclassicals is the involvement or inclusion of rational expectations. That's what makes these two schools very, very different. That agents, when they are given complete information, they can foresee the future. They can make an estimate about the results of a certain policy and act very well in advance. And as a result, this will lead to policy ineffectiveness. Okay, so that's the inclusion of rational expectations is the major difference between neoclassicals and neoclassicals. Okay. Next question. Which of the following are not an assumption of policy ineffectiveness propositions? Rational expectation, that is the main basis of policy ineffectiveness, right? So rational expectation is there, so we have to strike out because it is asking not, right? So we have to strike out wherever there is a, because this is the main basis of policy ineffectiveness. Please remember this, right? Then policy changes are not anticipated, right? Wrong. Policy changes are anticipated, okay, in case of policy effectiveness. So B has to be there. So with this we come to option 1 as the correct information, not. Okay. Then C, economic agents have full information. This is true, right? Yes, indeed, policy ineffectiveness is simply because agents have complete information. Then nominal variables influence economic decisions. Wrong. It is the real variables. Let's not forget, they are still classicals. They are influenced by the classical school of thought. Okay. Then output and employment are there at their natural level. That's true. This is one of the assumptions of policy ineffectiveness. So first is the right answer. Now, therefore, we come to the end of the video, but please remember that the schools of thought, main ideology is very much important, right? Where classicals were mainly focused on real variables, market variables and so on, that market will correctly the market will automatically adjust, right? Classicals were in favor of this. Keynes came into picture and stated that fiscal variables were equally important. Then monetarists came into picture stating that monetary policy is very much important. Monetary variables are very important. Then neoclassicals came into picture that micro variables are also important in understanding the macro aspects. And then neoclassicals came, they stated that no, the rational expectations is there. People do have knowledge, right? They're very well aware about the situation around them. So we have to take into account their expectations also, right? So these bases are very much important. Secondly, when you are left with less time, it is always, beneficial to strike out options. Right? So read one statement, strike out the options and start increasing your probability of answering the question correctly. Right? That's how you strategize in your multiple choice examination. Okay? So with this, I will end this video now. Thank you so much for watching and we'll see you in the next one. Till then, take care. Bye-bye. Thank you.